We had a very frank conversation tonight. How do we tackle this challenge? How give honor and respect in some very trying situations? Find out.
So I was at a parsha shir today, and this is something that has
Wow,
always,
from class to class, you are
yeah,
impressive, yeah.
always bothered me, and I've never had a good answer. The whole story of Tamar and Yehuda. Bottom line is, okay, so it was meant to be because, the kingship came from there, King David, and then ultimately Mashiach. But the pshat is that Yehuda came upon a prostitute. He slept with her, got her pregnant, and then when he realized that he was the culprit, it's like, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. So today, I can't get past that. Like, this is supposed to be a tzaddik, and this is what he does, this behavior. And I know they're not perfect. And then today I was told, well, halachically, he didn't do anything wrong because Tamar either had to get married with Yibum to him or to his son. So, okay, he didn't do anything halachically wrong in that respect, but he still came upon a prostitute, took her up on her wiles and got her pregnant. That's still like, I don't know. It's just, and to say, oh, well, because Mashiach comes from that. Well, it's coming from like, not a forbidden relationship, but an illicit relationship. Does that make sense? I don't know. I can't make sense.
Totally. You told me this before.
Yeah.
Have I? And I cannot make sense of it. And
I've heard this
Have
before
I?
from you.
me?
Oh. I will respond to one aspect, and then maybe we can try to figure out a little more deeply why it's bothering you. But I just respond to one aspect. First of all, whoever told you today was 100% correct. Everything you said you were taught was correct. Why is Mashiach coming from a relationship that you understand technically was kosher, but sure doesn't feel like it? Like, come on.
Not just that. It's just, he's supposed to be a tzaddik, or he's at a higher level. So what's he doing? Looking for prostitutes and then, sleeping with them. If any one of our, God forbid, a husband in our community did that, that would be a big shanda, and that would not be,
that would not be kosher. That would not be kosher.
Forget kosher. It wouldn't be
that
seen
is
well.
Not
it
kosher.
Would be,
that is very, very trade.
Right.
Like forbidden.
Yeah.
Okay. And that child would definitely have a lot of spiritual issues. The children of Yehuda and Tamar, there were two. They were twins, and they were both tzaddikim. Peretz and Zerach were both tzaddikim, which I guess is actually one way of proving that despite everything it looks like, there was absolutely nothing treif, forbidden, wrong about this, because there's no way, and this is actually a very significant point. Sorry for people that jumped on and are trying to understand what this relates to honoring one's parents. It doesn't. But Yael had the privilege of coming first, so she got the stage and the mic. So we're responding to your question, and then we will go back to the, of course, very significant topic of honoring our parents. Just a little background for people that came in the middle. Yael is asking something that I know bothers her. I know it's bothered her before, and I know I've tried to unwrap it before. So a number of weeks ago, in Parshas Vayeshev, is the story of Yehuda and Tamar. And Yael's question is, this feels really ugly. This feels really dirty. I thought Yehuda was a tzaddik. I know Mashiach should come from a line of tzaddikim, I would imagine. And this just feels gross. That's a brief version of her question. I don't want to start. I want to start with one of the things you said, and then I'm going to go back to something else. And then I got three things in my head all at once. I want to start with the Mashiach piece, because that really is the core to understand this whole issue. Mashiach comes from the line of David, specifically through Shlomo. That Mashiach's origin doesn't start with Shlomo. It doesn't start with David. It starts with Yehuda. So Mashiach is coming from Yehuda. For Mashiach to come into this world, he had to come through, as we would call it, a back door. He had to come through a back door because, well, there's actually many becauses. The most simple, obvious reason is to let this soul slip in without the forces of evil stopping it. We needed a number of back doors. And for example, you might not understand the idea of the back door, but understanding the forces of evil at work, David was supposed to be a stillborn. he was supposed to live and he was supposed to be stillborn, so he was supposed to have any life, but we need life. He's David, he's the father of the Davidic line, ultimately the father of Mashiach, and the forces of evil said he's not going to be born. And it says that Adam Harishon, Adam, the first man, saw this and donated 70 years of his life to David, which is why Adam lived 930 years instead of the perfect number 1,000. He gave 70 of his 1,000 years to David. He lived 930 and David was supposed to live 70. But then the forces of evil somehow managed to block that one too. They made another like football move and that was blocked. And then we're told the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Yosef, all chipped in. They obviously didn't have the luxury of 1,000, so they couldn't give away 70, but they all chipped in to create 70 years. Again, no back door there, but just again explaining this concept of the forces of evil blocking what they know is going to be their ultimate downfall. But how much more so when we get directly into this like ancestry of Mashiach. We have this weird story of Yehuda and Tamar. We have a weird story with David and Bacheva. And we have a number of other weird stories along the road. Rus and Boaz, you say, no, that's not weird. We understand that. Well, yeah, you can understand David and Bacheva also. You can understand Yehuda and Tamar also. But if you want to talk like this, shushking in the marketplace, they shushkied about Rus and Boaz a lot. Huh. He sees this beautiful woman, and she wasn't actually so young. She was about 40, but she was very beautiful. He was much older. He sees this beautiful woman, and he askins. He decides it's kosher. They get married, and the next night he dies. Huh? You see what was really going on there. Now, of course, that's exactly the opposite of the truth. And God kept him alive to have that one night with Rus. But that's not what it looked like in the marketplace. So you have a David and Bacheva, you have a Rus and Boaz, you have a Yehuda and Tamar. You have a number of these situations again and again for the same reason. It's the way to slip this greatest soul of all time. So great that it says in chapter 2 of Tehillim of Psalms about it, that God himself, so to speak, had to give his life for Mashiach. So this greatest soul, for it to come through all the generations, was slipping it through a lot of back doors. So specifically, deliberately, the story looked as bad as it did. So, the forces of evil could be laughing in the corner, how they shamed Yehuda. The soul of Mashiach is one more step in, is one more step in, is one more step in. Now, obviously, we could also apply this to children, not just to Mashiach. Sometimes very high souls specifically come to not such great parents. Hey, this might relate to what we're talking about. Whoa, we're not as off topic as we thought. Sometimes very holy souls come to people that are not holy at all. The most classical example, of course, we have is Avraham. Avraham's parents weren't just normative level, not the greatest people. They were the promulgators of idolatry of that time. Terach was like the mover and shaker in pushing idolatry. Avraham's mother, Amisle means emes lo, otherwise known as sheker, falseness, deceit. That was Avraham's mother. And Terach, who yes, eventually repented, but not when Avraham was born. They were both really big people in wrong places. And they got an Avraham, they got the soul of Abraham, specifically, deliberately, for 3 reasons. One reason, of course, because as we're saying, we got to slip this soul into the world. So do the forces of evil want an Abraham? Want monotheism brought into the world? Want the father of the Jewish people brought into the world? So we're going to slip it in a way that they're going to say, in that place, okay, we're good. No problem, God. He can go there. But there's deeper than that. There's also because wherever God puts a soul, her job is to refine and work through and release, as we call it Kabbalistically, release the sparks, extract the goodness and potential in that area. And if the area is darker, the sparks are bigger, and you need a really powerful soul to extract them because they're embedded in very dark places. So deliberately, a very great soul is going to come to a dark space because there's a lot of work here. There's a lot of sparks, and you need someone strong enough to get them out on maybe a simpler level. Who can God send to a dark space except a very great soul? For a regular soul, it's not fair. God, believe it or not, only gives us what we can handle. I know we sometimes think he misevaluates us, but in truth, God only gives us what we can handle. So for such a space, you need a very, very great soul. So this concept, which we're talking about, Mashiach, we're talking about Yehuda and Tamar, and it's totally there in a very big neon way, also applies to people in our world. And sometimes higher souls coming into areas, you'd be, really? Those parents got that child? Well, these are reasons why. So that's the first piece to like reshape our thinking about Yehuda and Tamar. It looks really bad. Yeah, that was deliberate design. It was supposed to look really, really, really ugly. So God did a good job. It looks really bad. That's true. That was God's intention. We got to get this soul in this world. And Ruth and Boaz looked really bad also. And David and Bacheva looked really bad also. And there's other stories. All looked really bad. Exactly, deliberately so. In terms of Yehuda's righteousness, I thought he was a tzaddik. He actually was. Do tzaddikim sleep with prostitutes? Not at all. So what was going on? I mean, we could legitimize it, and you could look in the Gemara where Yehuda asked her a bunch of questions. Are you married? Were you this? This is a prostitute. He's asking her the whole list to make sure this is kosher. But still, so halakhically it was kosher. It still looks really bad. So we are told that Yehuda at that moment did not have choice. That he was literally seized by this force, compelled, obviously we know by God, compelled to do this thing that made no sense to anything in his life, which is have this relationship with this woman on the street. And even as he asked her the questions, then when I learned that Talmud, a piece of a Gemara, because I learned it I maybe it was responsive to y'all's questions every time she asked me. I learned it to see, and like, yes, Yehuda really goes down the list of every possible scenario. How did he trust her? There's a concept called ne'emanos. How did he trust her here? There's questions we can ask. But we are told that literally he had no choice. It was not his free will. It was God making this relationship happen for all the reasons the teacher might have mentioned this morning or not. Okay, I just got a request. Can we start? So we will. But I wanted to say more, but hopefully what we said on some level.
No, that was good. That was good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everyone coming on. Elise, I'm not going to take your question, which seems rude of me, but you can WhatsApp it to me later, only because I was told people want to start. But please feel free to WhatsApp it to me. I always love questions and comments and insight into things that definitely are multifaceted. So we were talking not about Parshas Vayeshev, though I understand how it came into your discussion today, but about this week's Torah portion. And we're not talking about the blessings, which I think is what Yael got triggered by. We're talking about something that happened before, a famous incident where Jacob was blessing, before he blessed the 12 tribes, he actually blessed uniquely 2 of his grandchildren, Menashe and Ephraim, the 2 sons of Joseph. And in this famous incident that we probably all know, he crossed his hands to put his right hand on the head of Ephraim and his left hand on the head of Menashe. Right is precedence, right is kindness, right is stronger. And he wanted to give the stronger dose of blessings to Ephraim, who Joseph deliberately put there, because of course you should go like this, and then the right hand would go on Menashe and the left on Ephraim. Now, obviously Joseph was super sensitive to this issue because he suffered a lot. He actually almost lost his life and got sold. And yes, of course, in the end, we have a happy ending. But by the way, there were a lot of years before that. He sold when he was 17. He stood in front of Paro when he was 30. That was 13 long, painful years because there was a lot of jealousy of his brothers to him. And he definitely didn't want to start anything in another generation. Yosef was Yosef Hatzadik. He's actually referred to, there are very few people that the Torah refers to, or our sages refer to as the Tzaddik. Tzaddik meaning absolutely perfect, righteous, infallible. And Yosef was one of them. So what he did was not wrong. But we're looking at it from our end. And what he did then was say, Dad, what are you doing? What are you doing? Let's put right on Menashe and left on Ephraim. What are we starting up here with? Of course, Yaakov had his reasons, and what he did was correct, and Yosef, of course, accepted it. But for us, it's a great point of remembering this nullification we have to have, this acceptance, even as an adult, right? Yosef here, as Joseph, is an adult. It's his father came to Egypt when he was 39. This is 17 years later, okay? Menashe and Ephraim are not two little cute children, right? This is 17 years beyond the about 6 they were when they first arrived. So they're about 23, give or take. One was 23, one was 22, along those lines. Not little cute children, 23, 22-year-olds, getting a very significant blessing, but right-handed on Ephraim. We have to have this absolute nullification, this absolute acceptance, this respect for our parents and in-laws. In-laws are considered your parents. Yes, as long as you're married to your husband, your in-laws have the exact same rights and responsibilities as to your parents. It's a constant commandment. For many of us, it might be a difficult commandment. And it's one we want to do well. Beyond any other reason, to gift our children with a head start, what they see will create their relationship with this as well, for us and for their in-laws. There's a famous story, I'm sure many of you have heard, that is not a parable. It is actually a true story, but very poignant in bringing out this concept of some wealthy man who his old aged father was, it was like, senior abuse, as we call it nowadays, was living in his house, and he would just like, he was a wealthy man, and he would like treat him as a dish rag, dress him in rags, treat him like a rag. And one day he saw his son putting aside some rags. And he said to his son, like, what are you putting the rags for? Like, obviously in our house, nobody wears rags. And he said, oh, Dad, I'm putting them away for you. So when you're old, I'll have clothing to give you. Because that was how he dressed his father. And the man heard it and got the point. Was the son saying it to give his father a point, or was the son sincere? I don't know. You can see different versions of how the story is related. But either way, it's very telling. People a lot of times feel, not my parents, they don't deserve it. So that's a very, very deep issue, a very hard question. And sometimes there's a lot of emotions entangled in it. But we're told, bottom line, we owe our parents for their part in our creation. And we owe our in-laws for their part in our husband's creation. Gratitude for all they've done to us, for all they've done for him, helping us become the people we are who respect authority, which creates, of course, a stable, functioning society. So it's sort of necessary. There are two parts to this commandment. We have to revere and we have to honor. Revere means don't stand or sit in their place, don't contradict, don't do anything that harms them or their interests, don't do anything that demeans or denigrates their dignity. That could be hard sometimes. Honor means treat them as people that are important. Treat them as people that are significant. If it's in food or drink or clothing, whatever it is, give them that sense of you are significant to me. You are important to me. And some people, their only issue is what all of our issue is. They have no time. And maybe their parents take a lot of time. I think the lesson, the model of the Lubavitcher Rebbe is very telling in this. The Lubavitcher Rebbe would visit his mother daily for the 17 years she lived in New York. As we were just saying, or alluded to, that Jacob spent the last 17 years of his life with his son Joseph in Egypt. And 17 is a numerical value of good. Yaakov had a pretty hard life, but those last 17 years were really good. So an interesting parallel, the mother of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who's referred to by her name, Hannah, Rebbetzin Hannah, suffered a tremendous amount, had a very, very hard life. And the last 17 years of her life were really good. She was in New York with her son. And he visited her every single day. I don't know if any of us can say we visit our parents every single day. Maybe some of us can. It's a beautiful thing to say. At least we could try to talk to them every single day. He had a demanding schedule. He somehow found the time. Even, I'm going to tell you something that might sound shocking to you. And obviously he did this knowing the laws. Not that any of us could take this on our shoulders, but I'm going to tell you this. I was thinking, should I or shouldn't I? But I wanted to bring out the point, so I'm telling you this story. The Rebbe was one of 3 children, 3 boys, the oldest of 3 boys. One of his brothers was killed by the Nazis. So after the war, it was him and one other brother left. My brother had escaped Russia, escaped Germany then. He was in Germany, then he escaped the communists, then he escaped the Germans. He made it to Israel. And at this point in his life, he was in England. He was a professor of mathematics. And he completely suddenly passed away. And the Rebbe made the decision that when his brother passed away, he was not going to let his mother know. He knew what a painful, painful life she had suffered. He knew how much pain was in her heart. And he just felt, no, he had to protect her from this pain. Which means during the week of Shiva, the Rebbe was sitting Shiva for his brother. Every single day, he left the base Avel, he left the Shiva, and he went and he visited his mother. He had his sneakers painted black so she wouldn't notice. He just did not want to shock her with that news. Maybe the visits were a little briefer, maybe he was a little more constrained, but he visited his mother every day of the Shiva so she shouldn't suspect what happened. And then, until she passed away, which was about a year later, he would regularly write letters in his brother's handwriting. Remember, his brother lived in England. He would mail them to England, have someone there bring them to his sister-in-law, and she would add a little line in her own handwriting. And then this chassid, this follower of the Rebbe, would mail them back from England to his mother. So his mother got letters regularly from her son, just like her son would write, with his handwriting, with a note from his wife, probably like a line. We know how these things go. With all the stamps from England, so she would never know that her son passed away. That was how much he prioritized and did whatever he could to protect her. It's a model for us. To have behaviors, we could work on it. It needs, obviously, to be internalized. If you don't have the behaviors and you don't have the internalization, start with the behaviors. But ultimately, it has to be internalized, because only when we have it on the inside does our attitude change. It's important not just what we do, but how we do it. It says in the Talmud, it's a very interesting quote from the Talmud, that one child gives his parents pheasants. Pheasants is this very expensive bird to eat, and this can drive him from the world. And another child makes his parents grind the millstones, and this gives him world to come. So one parent is feeding his parent, one child is feeding his parents the most expensive food and going to be punished for it. One child is making his parent work hard labor, grinding the millstones, and he's going to receive reward for it. So what does this piece of Talmud mean? So the sages explain that everything is attitude. Rashi clarifies that you could give your parent the luxuries, but with such an attitude that it tastes horrible in their mouth. Or you could make your child grind wheat because that's the only way you have any food for them. So you're literally having your parent grind the millstone because you don't have the ability. You're working doing something else. You can't do it yourself. Bottom line, if this parent needs food, they have to grind the millstone, which is hard labor. But you do it with such love and compassion and kindness and tenderness. Rashi explains, this act expresses love. And the parent feels the love. And the parent with the expensive food feels the distaste. So someone asked me a question just now I'll respond to, which is, what if there was a divorce? And very often in a divorce, there's sometimes really hard feelings between the child and one of the parents. Sometimes, of course, both. So like in many things, we have to unpack that. And sometimes when you're a child, you can't unpack that. And very often when I speak to women who are divorced, if I can, I can't always, but if I can, I do broach the subject of don't bash your spouse. It's only hurting your child. it's only hurting your child. You don't gain anything if your child has a bad relationship with his father, your ex. I was actually very impressed. A woman who is going through actually a very, very, very messy divorce right now. And she told me how her ex took the boys for vacation to a skiing camp in Colorado, and one of the child hates it. And she was like really encouraging him to look at it with a positive eye. And I told her, and I meant it. I said, I am sincerely so impressed, because it's so easy as a divorced woman going through a really bad divorce to use this opportunity. Yeah, your father, he doesn't get you. Why does he understand? He took you there before when you told him you hated it then, and and it's really impressive that you're not saying any of that, and you're just telling him to look at the good and find good in this situation, because it's really a gift. But unfortunately, sometimes parents don't do that, and it's hard to do that. So sometimes friction between the parents creates in the child's head, siding with this one or siding with that one. Being close to this one is not being loyal to that one. And of course, sometimes there's reality. So I think as an adult, if a person does have a bad feeling to one of the parents, very often they're not always the father, you sort of have to unpack it and say, is that true, or is that the script I was told? And let me look with a set of adult eyes and see what's really going on. And sometimes actually it is true. Sometimes it is true. Oh, your father abandoned us, and it is true sometimes. And let's take it in the worst case. So I'm advising it. Sorry for a long-winded answer, but it's a real question. One point I'm saying is we can still be open to a relationship. Relationships are precious. They're precious for us. They're precious for our children. They enrich our lives. And it's hard when you have a lot of baggage, but sometimes we can be open to relationships for sure, if it was just hearsay, and even if there were some mistakes made. What if it's bigger than that? It wasn't just some mistakes made. It was real stuff that parent did that really hurt you and your other parent, and really, that doesn't take away our obligation to respect them. It actually does not take away our obligation to respect them. We just sort of have to figure out, what should I do that feels safe for me and is conveying respect to them? And that's sometimes a hard question. But as long as there was no abuse, as long as and of course, if there was abuse, it would be a different answer. But if there was no abuse, but there was really bad choices made that really harmed your family and their marriage and your own life, then you have to think, okay, I know this is what God wants from me, and it's not easy. And how can I take one step closer? How could I do something that's safe to me, but expresses something of how God wants me to treat my parent? Because even if it seems like a really hard commandment, it doesn't mean we don't have to do it. It just means it's hard. And sometimes a person feels, well, I can't have both my parents at my child's wedding or at my wedding. You have to sometimes talk to both. And again, it's not easy. I was just speaking to a woman who is divorced, bad divorce, husband was cheating on her divorce, and she just married off her first son. And obviously he was there, and his family was there, and his other wife was the new wife, not so new at this point, wife was there. And obviously those things were not easy for her, and she knew they wouldn't be easy for her, but she had to put her feelings aside for her child and his wedding. It's his wedding. She's a parent and he's a parent, and both parents should be at a child's wedding. So again, every situation is case specific, but if at all possible, both parents should be at an event in the life cycle of the child or the child's children. And again, I'm saying very broad generalities, and situations are very specific. And if the specific situations don't meet these generalities, then you would speak to your rabbi, you speak to your, what we call mashpia, which means your spiritual mentor, for guidance. But in broad strokes, this is our perspective. This is Torah's perspective. And this goes back to what I was saying before. So it was a very appropriate question. a lot of times I'm saying the broad we, for all of us, we feel, but they don't deserve it. But they didn't do anything to deserve it. But why do I owe it to them when this parent didn't do anything for me? This parent abandoned me. This parent wasn't there for me. This parent was checked out when I was growing up. Obviously, there can be more extreme or less extreme versions of that story, but it might not be true. It might be true, but you don't understand what your parent was going through and what the challenges they were dealing with, outer challenges, inner challenges, their own traumas. You might not know, or you might know. Or it might be 100% true, and we're not going to justify it. But even so, we still have an obligation to respect them and honor them. And that respect and honor is not contingent on our assessment if they deserve it. It's not contingent, just like you have to respect every teacher, even the ones you don't think are especially good. You have to respect your rabbi, even if you think he's wrong. So when we're told to respect people, it's really the position. And your parents, more than any other person I just mentioned, more than your in-laws or your teachers or your rabbis, your parents brought you into this world. Your parents gave you life. And that's a bottom line justification, if we need them, that we really have to respect them in their lifetime and after their lifetime. Going back to what the Talmud was saying, because I think it's a very important point. And again, this is ancient. This is in the Talmud. So these quandaries and challenges are obviously not new age situations. The Talmud is talking about giving riches with a bad attitude, or giving very simple things to making them work with kindness, with love, with compassion. So when we apply this to ourselves, I don't know if we're giving pheasants, I don't think we're grinding any millstones here. But when you do nice things, but negatively, you talk negatively, you feel negatively, it's very detrimental. It could be for a parent, it could be for an in-law. It's the same rule. Detrimental if you're talking negatively, obviously, to them, or if you're talking negatively about them, or if you're feeling in your heart negatively. All of these things color the relationship. They're felt. We know, we feel how people feel toward us, and so do they. Even if they pretend they don't, they get it. They get it. God has put a lot of demands on us. As I'm saying, this is, I think I call this tackling the challenge. There's a reason I call this that. There are a lot of demands on us in terms of honoring parents and in-laws. And it's interesting because the example is given from Esau, right? Esau, who we know was quite wicked, like extremely so, and he was, but he truly honored his father. We are told that his honor of his father, not of his mother, but of his father was real. To such a degree that he actually tried to cover over his evil, his lifestyle, because he understood how much it would pain his father. I don't know if he did a perfect job of covering over his lifestyle, but he tried. There was a Tana, means a sage of the Mishnah, whose mother was mentally unwell. I mean, we didn't even touch on the idea of people that are mentally unwell, but that obviously, again, is not a new age, 21st century, 20th century phenomena. No, it's recorded in the Mishnah, in the Talmud. So there's a sage whose mother was mentally unwell, and she would come to his lectures, and she would scream at him, and she would curse him. You think, oh, I think my mother embarrasses me. She would literally come in front of his students and scream at him and curse him. And he was always patient, and he accepted it all. And his students sort of offered they could take her away. He never allowed them to. Well, she's disturbing the lecture. She's my mother. She's disturbing. We're going to let her be. I tried to do some research to find out who this sage was. It might have been a rabbi known, a sage in the Mishnah known as Rabbi Tarfon. In other places, it discusses his enormous honor of his mother. In another place, it discusses his enormous honor of his mother, that he would crouch down for his mother to use his back as a step stool to get in and out of bed. Now, obviously, there were step stools. He could have given her one. She wanted him. She wanted her son, the honored, revered. Everyone thinks you're so great. Rabbi Tarfon, no problem. He'll be your step stool. And when he said this to his colleagues, they weren't even so impressed. Once he and his mother were walking, and the strap of her sandal broke, and he used his hand for her to walk on for the rest of the way. Another sage, Rabbi Yosef, it says that when he heard his mother's steps, he said, I'm arising for the approaching divine presence. they're modeling for us. Why do we need to know the scoop of what these people did 1900 years ago? Like, why do we care? Because it's modeling for us how we're supposed to do it. And again, we're being told examples. It wasn't easy. A mentally unwell mother embarrassing you, disturbing your classes, putting these crazy demands on you. You can say, well, if I was holy as Rabbi Tarfon, I'd be doing a lot of things differently. Okay, but this is an obligation that we have the same way he had it, and we're expected to step up to the plate as well. We're told that the way we honor and revere our parents is like the way we honor and revere God. It says in the Talmud that when children anger their parents, God said, it's good I'm not dwelling among them, because if I had, they would have angered me. Meaning God is comparing his relationship to us to our relationship to our parents. And we, of course, said this also applies to in-laws. This also applies to step-parents during your parents' lifetime. Meaning if a parent remarried someone for whatever reason, divorce, death, in either situation, you have the same obligation to respect a step-parent as a parent or as an in-law during the lifetime of your parent. If your own parent passes away, the question is asked, you still need to give honor to the step-parent that you're only giving honor because of their marriage to your parent? And the answer is, you don't have to, but it's appropriate. We said in-laws count, grandparents count. We're also supposed to give honor to our elder siblings, not to the same degree, but they also get some honor. Famous example is if a parent is sleeping and they have a key under their pillow, and the key is to a box that has something that someone wants to buy from you now, and you'd make a lot of money, or maybe it's your parents and they would make a lot of money. Are you allowed to wake them up? And the answer is no. But you're going to lose a lot of money. Well, you're not allowed to wake them up. But we're told if the parent would make this money, and if the parent would feel bad that you didn't wake them up for all this money, come on, what were you thinking? Then wake them up, because that will make them happy. Or we're told if your parent is sleeping and there's some religious duty he needs, something he's supposed to do to serve God, wake them up. Because in terms of serving God, we and our parents are in the same boat. There's, of course, a very famous story in connection to this idea of waking up the parent for the key under their pillow, which is why probably many of us know this law, with a non-Jew. A non-Jew is told here, listen, Asa was given as a model. Non-Jews are obligated in respect to their parents, just as Jews are. So a famous example from a non-Jew was a man named Dama, the son of Nisina. Long story, a very righteous Gentile. I'm not going to say the whole story. I assume many of you know it. But there was a very precious stone. The sages wanted it for the breastplate of the high priest, the Choshen, and the key was under his father's pillow. And his father was sleeping. And he kept checking, and his father was sleeping, and he kept refusing. And the sages thought, he wants more money from us. He wants more money from us. And they raised the money, and he kept refusing. Finally, his father woke up. And he took the key. And then he offered it to the sages for the original price. Meaning not only would he not sell this because he's not going to wait to his father for however much money in the world, but he refused to take the exaggerated price. He said, no, I'm not making money off honoring my father. I refused it because of honor for my father. I'm taking the original price. Very, very special merit. And God rewarded him very nicely for that, because one of the 10, we only have in our history 9 red heifers. The 10th is by the redemption. And one of those 9 were born to his flock. So he makes quite a lot of money off that. God rewarded him. So many people know that story. It's a very famous story. What people might not know is, besides having a father who sleeps with a key under his pillow, he also had a mother who was not well, who was mentally not well. Again, mental illness is not a new phenomenon. And he was sitting wearing this beautiful, again, he's not Jewish, so he was sitting among the Roman nobles, wearing this gold embroidered silk cloth, very expensive, looking very important, very regal. And his mother somehow came, and she tore it off, and she spat in his face, and he didn't say a word. Anyone had an experience with a parent or an in-law or a grandparent or a step-parent, because all of those people we have to honor, where they were shamed and they maintained their respect I don't want the details of what was done, but I would like to know how you responded. Anyone ever had such a situation?
Yes. Not with my mother, with someone else.
I listed 4 categories.
And then I was really mad at myself because I got stepped on and I didn't stand up for myself.
So someone shamed you. You maintained your composure. You did not respond. And then later you felt you were wrong.
Yes. And I did not respond because, oh, I'm so wonderful and I was trying to be respectful. I didn't respond because I'm not confrontational and it's just not in my nature to do that. And this is a long time ago. I've since changed. And then I was mad at myself because, I was wrongly wronged. And I didn't stand up for myself. And then it gives a message, oh, you can do this again and again and again and again. And it's okay because she's not going to do anything about it. She takes it. So no. So I feel like it was not right. And I've since learned to open my mouth a little bit more and stand up for myself.
I totally hear what you're saying. And you're right. There are 2 ways. There's not responding from strength and not responding from weakness.
Definitely weakness.
It was, and I can hear it. It was definitely from weakness. And it could be with anyone of authority, or it could be with a spouse. It could be with anyone that you give it in because you're weak, because you're scared, because you want people to like you, because you're intimidated, because people are around, you don't want to make a scene. Many, many, many people don't respond from weakness. That's totally true. But there's also not responding from strength. So I agree with you that if you did it from weakness, it's not a sign of strength. The not responding is actually how you're supposed to behave, but from strength, not from weakness.
Yeah, but then I get stepped on again.
So that's
and it happens again and again and again. Like there's only so much wrongly insulting I can take.
That's a good question. So if you're someone is in your life, because obviously we're talking about people in our lives, you're a parent, a step parent, a in-law, a grandparent, these people hopefully are in our lives, or they are, if we like it or not, they're family. So they're in our life and they're shaming us, they're stepping on us, they're mistreating us. And we're told, we just gave these beautiful examples from the sages, we could write Yael into the Talmud, of being shamed, being disgraced, being hurt, being humiliated, and taking it from strength. And Yael is saying, but if you do that, it's not going to stop. And that doesn't seem right. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts how anybody would respond to Yael and that very valid?
Not put up with it. I would put it to an end immediately. Set your boundaries, and that's it.
Thank you, Shira.
Never do it again. Trust me.
Okay. So Shira responded before I even finished my sentence. She knew the answer. Anyone else have any thoughts besides Shira?
It also depends who, though. If it's someone who's, is struggling, has a lot of pain, I think it's coming from a lot of pain, then you could be more sensitive to them. But if it's someone who just is just nasty and wants to prove to you and show you, and I would just say enough already. Cut the crap, keep your mouth shut. I'm not going to take it. And end it. Find someone else to pick on, and they probably will. If not, they'll keep picking on you. That's all I have to say.
And if I hear it, Yael gave a big thumbs up. Elisa's hands raised. Elisa.
I think that I respect what she was saying in terms of wanting to set boundaries in a healthy way. I also think there's something to be said for, even if someone else is making an unhealthy choice, when you're talking about it being in front of other people, then chas v'shalom, embarrassing them by responding in front of those other people, that sometimes there's a different context. I mean, there's a different context, if possible, to give Shira's message but in a respectful way. I feel like there needs to be a medium somehow of not chas v'shalom causing embarrassment and remaining quiet, but also not giving an invitation, as Yael and Shira both, saying that, we don't want to invite unhealthy behavior either.
I think I hear what Yael's saying, I hear what Shira's saying, I hear what Elisa's saying, and I think, we need to protect ourselves, but as Elisa's saying, and this is the great challenge, how do we protect ourselves respectfully? And I don't think necessarily Shira meant at the moment when the person is shaming you, open up your mouth to them back. I don't necessarily even think she meant that. I think she meant just make sure it stops. And the question is, how? Especially if someone's unhealthy, which might or might not be in your situation. And, if someone's unhealthy, it might be harder for it to stop. If someone's healthy and didn't realize that you actually have feelings and you're actually hurt by these comments, maybe, other people think they're fine, or that's what this person assumed. So then it would be different. I think what Elisa's saying is a very good point, though. We don't want to hurt someone else in response to them hurting us. It's not like, like if you fight with someone who's dirty, you get dirty. So the goal here isn't to, oh, you bash me, I'm going to bash you. Oh, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. But at the same time, what Yael is saying is true. So somehow there has to be a meeting between the model the sages are giving us, which is keep your mouth closed and let this abuse continue. And Yael's saying, but if I keep my mouth closed, it will just continue and continue and continue. Miriam, what were you going to add?
I was just going to say, maybe just have a private conversation, one-on-one, so no one's embarrassed.
A private conversation, a letter, an email. If it's his parents, maybe have your husband deal with it. If it's your grandparents, maybe turn to your mother or father about their parents. If it's a step parent, maybe turn. Yeah, meaning there has to be a way to do. I think there has to be a balance, and I don't know in general how to say the balance because I think it's a very case-specific situation. But I think Yael is right that we're not being asked to be a punching bag here. I totally accept that point of truth. And at the same time, we're being told very clearly not to open up our mouth, not to shame them, not to humiliate them when they're doing that to us. So somehow we have to find, and again, going back to speaking to your rabbi, speaking to a mentor, speaking to a therapist, as we said last week, maybe that's going to be a good counsel. Speaking to someone, because often when we're in a situation, even when the solution is simple, we can't see it. We're in the situation, we're stuck under the situation, we can't see a clear path. So sometimes when you speak to the rabbi, the mentor, the therapist, someone else, then you can have some simple solution of like, how do I protect my boundaries while still maintaining my obligation to respect? Say whoever, so it was a grandparent who just is very critical and publicly critical. So maybe you keep quiet, not from weakness. I accept Yael's point, but from strength. I know I have this obligation. I don't want to shame them as they're shaming me. I'm going to respect them as the parent of my parent or whatever. And then just make a mental note to yourself to try not to be around, not to go to their parties, not to this, not to that, to create some space. And then maybe they will get the message. And maybe if they don't get the message, just try to find some more subtle way to protect yourself. If you talk to them on the phone once a week and then they start saying things that hurt you, that could be your line to, oh, I'm so sorry, I've got to go now, Grandma. Bye. It was so nice talking to you. Do it 3 times, 5 times, 20 times, 30 times. If someone's very obtuse, do it 50 times. Eventually, they will get the point. So again, trying this very delicate juggling act of God is giving me a challenging, difficult situation. I want to live up to his expectation, and I don't want to get hurt. And figuring it out how you balance from maintaining my obligation and at the same time not getting hurt. And some things are sometimes very, very not simple. Lisa, did you have, I saw your hand up.
Yes. Okay, so when it comes to so within a marriage, everyone's coming, well, not everyone, sometimes they grow up in very, almost identical type of families, but usually not. And usually we have a different sense of what kibbutz aim is and our expectations. So when it comes to honoring each set of parents, we can, within our marriage, each have different understandings and expectations. Would you just give a few pointers on how to best navigate that?
Yes, you are absolutely correct. So what Eliza is saying is, within the marriage, I think I'm totally honoring my parents, and I extend the same honor to my in-laws. We'll just say you, obviously the converse is true, but we'll just say for yourself. You feel you honor your parents, you extend the same honor to your in-laws, you think you're doing wonderful, and your in-laws do not feel honored or respected or important in your eyes, and they really don't think you're doing a very good job at all, and they even tell your husband about it. Simple version of Elisa's question. It's true. And I think what Elisa's saying is exactly the reason why. Because especially if parents are coming from two different cultures, culturally, some people have a certain set of expectations, other people have a very different set of expectations. So it's really good to, if you see this conflict, start by, in a really nice way, discussing it with your husband and sort of saying, like, I see your parents, like, they don't seem to feel I'm a very good daughter-in-law. I'm trying so hard. What's going on? And maybe he would say, oh, well, my sisters, me, they would expect from you to do this, this, and this, and you're not doing it. And I don't have any complaints, but they do. And then the question would be, okay, are these things I can adopt because it's important to them? Or are they really hard for me to adopt? Maybe because I don't even do this for my own parents. Why would I do it for my in-laws? And then sometimes you have to get past that and say, because it's important to them. Because my parents have no expectations, have no desire for this, but my in-laws do. And I'm supposed to give them honor as they understand honor. It's a very interesting concept, what Eliza's raising, which is what means honor? And it's very, very subjective. And some people want their children to call them regularly, and some people don't want it. Many other examples along those lines. What means honor? What the person is assuming is meaning they're special and significant and respected in your eyes. So if your in-laws have a different bar, a higher bar, a more difficult bar, and you're just totally not used to it, it could be something that you discuss with your husband and ask him to sort of convey the message, like, wow, I don't do this for my parents. And I'm willing to try, but, this is what I could try doing now. And, hopefully over time I can add other things. Again, sometimes he can convey that message, sometimes he cannot. And sometimes he doesn't want to get in the middle between the two of you. And that's also totally fair. But definitely, both for your in-law's sake and for your husband's sake, it's really good to really try to honor them as they want and need to be honored. It's good for your relationship with them and for what God wants from you. And it's also good for your husband, because if he's honoring them that way and you're not, it could create a sort of conflict. It could create a stress. And especially if they talk bad about you to him, and then he's put in a very, very awkward, uncomfortable situation.
What if what their expectation is not even what your husband is comfortable doing, because it's in a different value system, a different category. Like let's say to them, I'm just giving a wild example, but maybe not such a far stretch, that they're into, let's say, social media or a certain, whole group thing. And they want all their things followed with thumbs ups. And you and he are not in social media. So I'm just giving that as an example where it's not your value system or your husband's value system, but that's how they want. It's a different currency.
So that's a great example of where a person has to extend themselves and do things that they're not into. And again, if you say as a religious value, I don't have Facebook, and they want you to thumb up all their Facebook posts, you could explain to them you don't have Facebook and you'd love to see their posts, and maybe they could send it to you via WhatsApp or some other medium you have. But let's pretend, no, you have Facebook, you just never go on it and never bother. And it's a big time waster and you don't have the time for it. But it's really important to them. So you could put in your calendar once a week to just go on and thumb up all the pictures of the previous week. You don't have to look at them, just give them thumbs. All the pictures in one shot. And keep doing that once a week. And just think, God, this is for you. This is for you. I'm not wasting time. I'm going into my Facebook account, thumbs, and going out of it. So yeah, that shows, you mean I have to go to a place that's uncomfortable? I have to stretch. I have to do what I normally wouldn't do? Yeah. And what if your in-laws expected, demanded, wanted that the whole family gets together for a meal every Wednesday night. And you're like, oh my gosh, I have a life. I can't spend 2.5 hours sitting and eating food and socializing with people I'm not so interested in. It's not an easy expectation. But if that's what they want and that's very important to them, then we're supposed to be respectful and do it. If, again, as long as we're told, obviously the line we're told is you can't cross if it's a line against God. If it's something that would be a conflict with what God wants from you, then we're told no. Your respect and honor for God supersedes for your parents or in-laws or step-parents or grandparents. But if it's not God involved, it's just inconvenient. It's not your world. It's not your value system. If it's a birthday and you know your mother-in-law expects, demands, wants a very expensive birthday gift, and that's very important to her, and you don't have the money for it, don't have the interest for it, don't do it for your mother. You write her a nice card. Maybe you send her flowers and she's happy. And your mother-in-law, you're supposed to shell out so much money for? Yeah. You're supposed to prioritize it. Maybe it's not as much as she wants because you can't do that, but as much as you can if you know this is her value system. And this is really important to her, then yes, you have that obligation, because your obligation to her, like your obligation to your parents, comes from God. It's, again, it's not that she deserves it. That doesn't deserve it. This is what God wants from you. Now, what if your parent is doing something like, again, like we said, going against God's will? Like maybe, I mean, simple example, what if they're gossiping to you? So here again, we'd have this conflict. You respect your parent, you respect to God. God says you can't gossip. And I believe we just discussed last week the harms of hearing gossip. So if your mother likes to gossip, or your mother-in-law, or your stepmother, or your grandmother, or the males in any of those situations, and they're talking to you, yeah, you can't listen. So how do you not listen? Well, if you're on the phone, you graciously at that moment get busy and have to get off. And again, 5 times, 10 times, 30 times, 50 times, at a certain point, they might connect the dots and realize if they want to have a long conversation with you, they shouldn't go in that direction. I wouldn't tell them, oh, I don't gossip. That would sound very rude. In other words, and you do. But I would get off the phone. The same way I would get off the phone if a friend was starting to gossip, and I'm not going to tell her I don't gossip either. So what do? It's easy on the phone. I get off the phone. Well, what if it's a person? Well, depends what's going on in your life. I think Eliza said last week, oh, I have to use a restroom. If you have children, oh my gosh, so-and-so is having a meltdown. I better go. And there's probably some child in the vicinity having some meltdown. You can always use that as an excuse. Find some gracious way to leave physically. And if you're on the phone, it's even easier. So just as it's true with gossip, it's true with everything else. What if, as someone just called me about yesterday, you have a relative having a marriage ceremony with a non-Jewish person, and your parent or in-law are really expecting you to be at that wedding? Yeah, God comes first. God comes first. Unfortunately, there's a lot
This is her, and
yes.
I was talking to someone today on the phone, and they're about to say Shahar, and I'm like, nope, not listening, quiet, not listening. I'm like, no, wait, just you'll love this. I'm like, no, quiet, not listening. And they were so frustrated. But I said, I'm like, no, I heard a class last week. I am not going to go to hell for this. It's not worth. I don't care what you're saying. And it shut them up. It worked. It wasn't as played as probably Eliza would do it, but it totally worked.
It worked. Okay, everyone has to do it.
And I didn't hear it.
Everyone has to do their own style. As long as it works, we're very proud of you. And I don't know if anyone else in a different way over the week remembered something and cut off someone, and amazing.
I don't know, but I am beginning to think that, Shira, I think I need you at certain moments in my back pocket. Because, well, I'm trying to think of the most delicate way to handle and whatever. You're already out there. You're done.
She's done. She's done. She got it all covered. No time to waste. Okay, I have a lot more to say. It's late. We're going to stop here and to see.